Hi, I'm Sophie. Nice to meet you. Before I tell you my story, kindly hit the subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I like to know where you're from. Now let's dive in. I used to think the worst thing a kid could hear was, "I wish you'd never been born." But I learned there's something worse when your parents never say it out loud, but live like it's true every single day. My sister Hannah was the golden child. Straight A report cards, trophies from gymnastics, shiny hair that mom brushed every night. She was the star of every family story, the princess in every picture. And me? I was just there. An extra. The space filler in the background of their perfect little life. When Hannah got an A, Mom would bake her a cake. When I got an A, Mom would say, "Well, that's what you're supposed to do." If I spilled milk, it was a crime. If Hannah spilled milk, it was an accident. It didn't take long to figure out where I stood. Dad wasn't mean exactly. Just absent. Even when he was in the same room, he felt 1,000 miles away. His eyes always slid past me like I was a piece of furniture, something that was just part of the scenery. I learned early not to ask for hugs, rides to soccer practice, or even help with homework. Hannah got bedtime stories. I got slammed doors. When I cried quietly, because the last time Mom caught me, she told me to quit being dramatic and sent me to my room without dinner. But there was one person who saw me, really saw me, my grandmother Ruth. Every Friday after school, she'd pull up in her old blue Buick, a smile lighting up her whole face the second she spotted me. "There's my girl," she'd say, as if I were the best thing she'd seen all week. At her house, everything felt softer. The air smelled like cinnamon. The couch was worn in all the right places. She'd make pancakes shaped like hearts and tell me my laugh sounded like music. And she listened. Not the distracted, half-nodding kind of listening my parents gave. She'd lean in, eyes warm, and take in every word like it mattered. I remember one night at her kitchen table, the two of us sipping hot chocolate while rain tapped against the window. I stared into my mug and whispered, "I think Mom hates me." The words felt dangerous, like they might blow up in my face if I said them too loud. Grandma didn't rush to contradict me. She didn't tell me I was wrong or that Mom meant well. She just reached over, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, and said, "Sweetheart, some people don't know how to love. But I do. And I always will." At 10 years old, I clung to those words like a lifeline. Back at my parents' house, I tried to pretend they didn't hurt me anymore. I told myself I was tough, that I didn't need them. But sometimes, on quiet nights when Hannah was asleep and the house was still, I'd feel the weight of it pressing on my chest. That bone-deep ache of wanting someone to see you, to choose you, and knowing they never would. It wasn't that I wanted to be the favorite. I just wanted to matter. I didn't know it then, but those weekends with Grandma weren't just a break from my life. They were the beginning of something bigger. A seed she was planting, showing me what love actually looked like. One day, that seed would grow into something strong enough to break me free. But back then, all I knew was this. In a world where I was invisible to the people who were supposed to love me the most, Grandma made me feel like I was the only one in the room. And that feeling was the only thing keeping me afloat. By the time I was 13, weekends with Grandma weren't just a routine. They were my lifeline. I'd count down the days until Friday, watching the clock in class, knowing that the moment her blue Buick pulled into the school parking lot, I could breathe again. But that year, things started to change. Grandma's health had been quietly slipping. Little things at first. She'd get winded climbing the porch steps, forget where she'd put her keys. Then one icy February morning, she fell on her front steps. A neighbor found her and called an ambulance. I remember sitting in the hospital waiting room, my knees bouncing, praying she'd be okay. Mom and Dad showed up too, but not for me and not out of worry for her. They barely spoke to me, just sat there flipping through their phones until the doctor came. Grandma ended up staying in the hospital for over a week. While she was recovering, a lawyer came to visit her. I didn't think much of it at first. Adults had boring paperwork all the time, but I noticed how tense my parents suddenly became after they spoke to him. It was a few days later that I overheard them talking in the hallway outside Grandma's hospital room. Mom's voice was sharp, almost frantic. "She's leaving most of it to her? Are you kidding me?" Dad lowered his voice, but I still caught the words. We'll fix it. We just need to be nicer to the kid for a while. The kid. Not me. Not your daughter. Just the kid, like I was a stray they'd picked up and didn't want to keep. I didn't fully understand what most of it meant, but I figured it out soon enough. Grandma had money. Not just a little extra money. This was the kind of money that could change someone's life, pay for college, buy a house, erase years of struggle. And she planned to leave it to me. The shift was instant. When Grandma was released from the hospital, my parents suddenly acted different. Mom asked about my grades like she actually cared. Dad started showing up at my band concerts, clapping loudly from the back row. They bought me new clothes, not just cheap clearance stuff, but brand names. Hannah wasn't thrilled about it, but even she started being a little nicer, like we were suddenly teammates. Part of me wanted to believe it. To think maybe they'd finally realized I deserved to be loved. But there was this heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake, a voice whispering, "They're pretending." One Friday night, when it was just me and Grandma watching an old black and white movie, I told her about the sudden change. "It's weird," I said. "They're nice now. Like, really nice. Buying me stuff. Asking me things." Grandma didn't even pause the movie. "They're circling," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Don't mistake this for love, darling. It's greed wearing a mask." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say she was wrong, that maybe my parents were finally seeing me. But deep down, I knew she was right. The attention felt too polished, too sudden, like they were reading from a script they'd only just been handed. Still, I couldn't help wishing the mask was real. For a while, I played along. I answered their questions, smiled when they gave me gifts, pretended I didn't notice the way their eyes lit up whenever Grandma's name came up. But the more I saw it, the more it made my stomach twist. I didn't know exactly what they were planning. I just knew this. Whatever game they were playing, I was a pawn in it. And pawns don't get happy endings, unless they learn how to play back. For a while, I told myself I could live with it. Let them play nice. Let them pretend they cared. If it meant fewer slam doors and more quiet dinners, I could deal with being their little project. But the thing about masks is, they never stay on forever. It started small. Mom suggested that Grandma let her help manage her finances, just to take some of the pressure off. Dad kept talking about these amazing family vacations we could take together once things settled down, casually hinting that Grandma could pay for them. At first, they kept those conversations between themselves and Grandma, but it wasn't long before I started overhearing things I wasn't supposed to hear. One night, I was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. The light was off, but I froze in the hallway when I heard their voices. "She's got Ruth wrapped around her little finger," Mom said, her tone like she'd just bitten into something sour. Dad's voice was lower, like he didn't want the neighbors to hear. "If we don't get that girl on our side, Ruth's going to leave it all to her. And we'll be stuck with nothing." That girl. Not my daughter. Not her name. Just that girl. Like I was a stranger who'd wandered into their lives by mistake. My grip tightened on the banister. My heartbeat was so loud in my ears I was sure they'd hear it. But they didn't. They just kept talking, their voices dripping with calculation, like I was a piece of property they were trying to win. I backed away slowly, every nerve in my body screaming. I didn't go into the kitchen. I didn't get water. I went straight to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of my bed until my hands stopped shaking. By the next morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let them use me as some kind of ticket to Grandma's money. If they wanted a pawn, they'd have to find another one. That weekend, when Grandma picked me up, I told her everything. Every word I'd overheard. Every fake smile I'd seen. Every coincidental moment where they'd brought up her will or her money. She didn't look shocked. Just sad. Like she'd been hoping she was wrong but knew she wasn't. "They're not going to stop," she said quietly. "And the longer you're under their control, the more power they have over you." "What do I do?" I asked. I hated how small my voice sounded. Grandma hesitated. "We can protect what's yours," she said. "But more importantly, we can protect you." That was when she first mentioned something I'd never heard before, emancipation. It sounded like something out of a history book, not a word meant for kids like me. She explained that if we could prove neglect and emotional abuse, the court could grant me legal independence, or allow her to become my legal guardian. It was terrifying. The idea of standing in a courtroom, talking about all the ways my parents had failed me, made my stomach twist. But at the same time, there was this spark of hope, a way out. Over the next few weeks, I noticed the mask slipping even more. My parents' kindness got sloppy. They forgot to hide their irritation when I didn't answer their questions fast enough. They snapped at me in public. And every time they slipped, I wrote it down, just like Grandma told me to. The evidence was building. So was my courage. I didn't know what the courtroom would be like. I didn't know what my parents would say about me. But I knew one thing. I was done letting them write my story. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to give them one. The first time I walked into a lawyer's office, I felt like I'd stepped onto another planet. The walls were lined with books taller than me, the kind with gold lettering that looked too fancy to touch. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, and the woman behind the desk, Ms. Carter, had a voice that was calm but sharp, like she was used to cutting through lies. Grandma sat beside me, her hand warm over mine. She did most of the talking at first, explaining the situation, while I stared at the glass of water on the table and tried to keep my knees from bouncing. Ms. Carter asked me questions, simple ones at first, like, "How old are you?" and "Who do you live with now?" But then came the harder ones. "Have you ever gone without meals? Been denied medical care? Felt unsafe in your home?" I answered honestly, my voice barely above a whisper. The more I spoke, the more I felt this strange mix of fear and relief, like I'd been carrying a weight for years and was finally setting it down, piece by piece. When the meeting ended, Ms. Carter leaned forward. "If we do this, you need to be ready. Your parents will fight back. They'll try to paint you as ungrateful, or even a liar. But if you tell the truth and we have the evidence, you have a strong case." On the ride home, I stared out the window. My stomach knotted. I'd wanted a way out, but now that I had one, it felt like stepping onto a bridge made of glass. One wrong move, and everything could shatter. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. I kept a journal, writing down every instance of neglect I could remember. Dates, times, details. Grandma and Ms. Carter gathered school records, medical forms, and even statements from neighbors who'd seen the way my parents treated me. My parents must have sensed something was brewing, because their fake kindness went into overdrive. Mom started making my favorite dinners, the ones she never bothered with before. Dad offered to help with my homework. Hannah invited me to hang out in her room, something she hadn't done in years. It might have fooled me once, but not anymore. I saw the desperation in their smiles, the way their eyes flickered every time money came up. It wasn't love, it was strategy. The first court date was the hardest. Walking into that room, seeing my parents sitting at the petitioner's table, looking polished and concerned, made my chest tighten. They smiled at me like we were a happy family, but their eyes were cold. When it was my turn to speak, my hands shook so badly I had to grip the edge of the stand. The judge's gaze was steady, patient. "Take your time," he said. I swallowed hard and told my story. About the favoritism, the neglect, the nights I'd gone to bed hungry because I'd been bad, about how Grandma was the only person who'd ever made me feel safe. My voice wavered, but I didn't stop. When I finished, the room was silent. My parents avoided my eyes. Over the next few hearings, we went over evidence. My parents denied everything, insisting I was confused or misremembering. But the more they spoke, the more cracks appeared in their version of the story. By the final day, I wasn't just scared. I was angry. Angry at the years they'd taken from me. Angry that they still thought they could twist things to their advantage. And underneath that anger was something else. Determination. I wasn't just fighting for money. I wasn't even just fighting for freedom. I was fighting for the right to define my own family. And I wasn't going to lose. The decision came on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind of day where the sky feels heavy enough to fall on you. I sat next to Grandma in the courtroom, my hands twisted together in my lap, pretending to be calm. The judge shuffled through a stack of papers, his glasses sliding down his nose. "In the matter of guardianship," he said, his voice steady, This court finds that it is in the best interest of the minor for Ruth Coleman to assume full legal guardianship. I barely heard the rest. My throat tightened, and it was all I could do not to burst into tears right there. Beside me, Grandma squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. I glanced at my parents. Mom's jaw was tight, her lips pressed so thin they almost disappeared. Dad stared at the table, avoiding my eyes completely. They didn't even stay to hear the judge finish. By the time we stood, they were gone. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping out of a cage I'd lived in so long I'd forgotten it had a door. That afternoon, we went straight to Grandma's house. There was no big celebration, just the two of us in her kitchen, a pot of soup simmering on the stove, and the quiet comfort of knowing I wasn't going back. For the first time in my life, my bedroom felt mine. The quilt on the bed wasn't just something to sleep under. It was a gift she'd made me years ago, every stitch a little piece of love. I unpacked my things slowly, putting books on shelves, pictures on the wall. It wasn't just moving in, it was planting roots. The days that followed were almost surreal. There were no slammed doors, no cold silences at the dinner table. I didn't have to second-guess every word I said. If I forgot to rinse my cereal bowl, nobody yelled. If I had a bad day, I could talk about it without being told to stop being dramatic. We built a rhythm. Saturday mornings were for pancakes, always in heart shapes. Afternoons were for gardening, our hands in the dirt, her teaching me which flowers could survive even the harshest winters. Sometimes, I'd catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the kindness to disappear, for the warmth to turn cold. But it never did. Grandma's love didn't have conditions. It didn't need me to be perfect. It just was. The scars from my parents didn't vanish. There were still nights I woke up from dreams where I was back in that house, invisible again. But now, there was someone to sit with me in the dark, to make tea, to remind me that I wasn't there anymore. One evening, we sat on the porch, the sun dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and pink. I told her something I'd been holding on to for years. I used to think there was something wrong with me, I said quietly. That I wasn't worth loving. She reached over, covering my hand with hers. Oh, sweetheart. You were worth loving from the moment you took your first breath. They just didn't know how to see it. But I did. And I always will. Her words sank deep, settling in places that had been empty for too long. I'm older now, and I understand something I didn't back then. Family isn't about blood. It's about love. It's about the people who show up, who choose you even when it's hard, who make you feel like you matter. Grandma chose me. Every single day, in ways big and small, she kept choosing me. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself too. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time. Bye.